Well, let's look at some of those issues in a bit more wider detail now, and I'm joined by global events analyst Marco Vicenzino. So, Marco, nice to see you. The verdict then, significant in that he's the first president of Egypt to be sentenced to death, and he was also the first freely elected president of the country. What do you think this says for democracy in the region?
Well, when you say that democracy is not all about just elections, democracy is about the institutions of civil society. It's about a democratic culture that evolves over time. The word pluralism is key. It's about outreach, inclusion, and not exclusion. And the problem is that in Egypt, Morsy and many others took that approach of a winner-take-all, zero-sum game. So if you look at if one wants to ask about democracy in the Middle East, Egypt provides the lessons on what not to do. If the Middle East, you want to see where democracy in the Middle East, in the Arab world, is starting to take root, look at an example like Tunisia. There's many, many lessons to take out of there. The secular and the secularists, and together with the Islamists, at the beginning there was it was a very difficult period. After the overthrow of Morsy, finally they realized that in order to move forward, they'd have to come together. And there was bridge building, consensus building. Today, Tunisia is on a positive route towards a democratic system.
Do you think that the government of Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been a bit too harsh on what Morsi did? Do you think that he justifies having the death penalty put against him?
When the crackdown, or we'll say the ouster of Morsi in July of 2013 took place, Sisi and his generals, they made a decision. If the crackdown is going to take place, it has to be done so comprehensively, and there's no middle way of doing it. And we have to do it effectively. And so far, they've done it effectively. But in terms of the death penalty, I doubt that'll take place. It's not to the advantage of Sisi or to the government to make Morsi into a martyr.
Since the ousting of Morsi and since the Abdel Fattah al-Sisi government has taken shape, we've seen a lot tighter security in the country, haven't we? Are we likely to see any demonstrations of that ilk again?
The government will be relentless and very vigilant to contain protests, particularly mass protests from spinning out of control.
And when it comes to sort of the fall of Mohammed Sisi, when we look at how he came to power less than 3 years ago, heralded as around the world as Egypt's first freely elected president, and today he's staring at this death sentence. So what do you make of his journey?
Many serious mistakes were made along the road. Basically, like I said, when he became president, as the first democratically elected president, when you have a democracy in its early stages, you need that consensus building, that outreach. He failed to do that. That was coupled with incompetence, mismanagement, and began on a route towards more autocratic tendencies, which triggered a public reaction to the point where in early of July of 2013, hundreds of thousands had massed in protest that the army, together having this overall widespread popular support, did and executed their ouster of Morsi. Initially, there was condemnation around the world, but Sisi intelligently and very skillfully turned the tables, whereby he got immediately the support of the Saudis, the UAE, and Kuwait to provide him with the economic support, because Egypt was practically in shambles economically. And today, the Americans recently, they've restored full military aid to Egypt. Sisi right now is in the strongest position he's ever been in since the ouster of Morsi.
And what do you think that the international community, mentioning some of the countries that you touched on there, will be thinking about the situation in Egypt at the moment?
For the international community, Egypt remains a cornerstone for stability and security in the region. And if Egypt is stable, there's a conflict, there's an all-out conflict on the Sinai Peninsula. That's being fought out in Sinai. Within the other parts of Egypt, you're having targeted assassination and bombings, but the government still remains strong. The international community, the Gulf states, when you look at the entire Middle East and North Africa, they look at Egypt as a base of stability. And the international community, particularly the United States, Europe, and the regional allies, look upon Sisi as someone who's very solid and who's very stable. And for them, that's key for right now in the region.
What do you think is the current state of the Muslim Brotherhood, the party, the movement that Mohammed Morsi set up? Because hundreds of their supporters have been thrown in jail in the crackdown that al-Sisi's government has implemented. Are we likely to see them become more prominent in the face of opposition to what's happening to Mohammed Morsi at the moment?
The Muslim Brotherhood and many of their allies in the region are down, but they're not out. the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt has always proven, they have a long history of mostly being in opposition. In opposition, they've been resilient, well organized, and a very, very loyal base of supporters. So like I said, although they're down, they're not out, and the government is going to be very, very vigilant in just tracking their moves.